Okay, so on our first class, what we will do is we will review the contents again. We will review the topics that we are going to cover as part of this training program in little bit more detail than what we did in the demo classes. Okay, so what those topics are, what will be covered again within those topics. Okay, so we will actually try and understand this course in a slightly better way, because there could be possibility that some people who joined the demo, or who may not have joined today, or people who may not have joined the demo are now joining today. So it would give a fresh start to everyone, plus better understand what the different topics are, especially in detail. Okay. Also, what we will do is, since it is our class one, so we will not load on to different core concepts starting today. We will first try to set the rules of conduct, how we want to go forward in conducting these classes. Okay, we will see if there are any questions, and then from Monday onwards, we will start with our core concepts. So we will look at some of the topics like commonly used terms in IT, okay, so that everyone is on the same page in terms of what terms we are going to refer. Plus, this will also help us enable that everyone talks in the same terminology or in the same language. Okay. Then we will look at history of BA and topics like that in complete details. Okay. Now coming back over here, and before we get started for the day, I've just mentioned the Harsha Trainings coordinator number over here, because as we go through these sessions and as we get into more technical details, okay, the people who will be enrolling, they will be getting access to the training videos, notes, to the group access and job updates along with it as well. So as early as possible, hope you all get enrolled, and we will continue to work together for next 1.5 to 2 months time. Okay. Now these are broadly the categories that we were discussing during our demo class as well. That what happens as part of this course, what topics are being covered as part of this course. So business analyst introduction is will be our first category of topics. Okay. So during our demo, we discussed that we want to design this course in such a way that even people from IT or non-IT find it relatively useful, especially for the people from the non-IT. So some of the people who are already from IT background, they may understand different terms like environment, like architects or technical architects, SMEs. They may understand different terms again like change request. Okay. But people who are coming from non-IT background, they may not understand the meaning of these commonly used terms. So that is where we try and set the bar at the same level for everyone. Now, for someone who is coming from non-IT, this introduction part would help them learn the basics of IT industry. Okay. Usually, if you go into any course, normally people would directly start from the technical topics itself. But here, what we are trying to do differently is not just cover the technical topics but also help people understand the different nuances or sides of IT industry as well, so that when you join in over there you don't feel completely new to the organizations. Okay, you understand that how it works, what could be the different components. For people who are already part of IT industry, these first few days will serve as refresher for you people. Okay, so you will also understand some of the, or basically revise some of the commonly used terms in IT, then how the history of BA was created, what are some of the competency or skills that are required as BA, okay, how the team structure is placed, different people involved within the team that is working on creating a software. And then we will move on to software development life cycle. What is the software development life cycle? What are the different phases in it? And then we will cover, based on SDLC, we'll cover the exhaustive roles and responsibilities for BA. Okay. So that when someone asks you any questions related to BA roles and responsibility, you just don't say that BA write requirements or BA is responsible for conducting meetings. You understand in detail and you are able to provide more relevant answers. Okay. Now, when we move on to our next category, so the first week when we have set the basics for everyone so that we all are talking in the same language, the same terminology. The reason why we have also devised this introduction part is actually to get to a common terminology. Okay? See, the key for appearing for any interview is to talk in a language that the person who is doing the job uses. Okay, so suppose if I tell anyone that what do you do as a business analyst, the other person replies to me stating that I meet with clients. Okay, I write down requirement documents. Now these are not incorrect answers, okay, but these are answers given in a very simple English language. Now, on the contrary, probably someone who is working as a business analyst will try to reply like, I utilize any of the appropriate elicitation techniques as applicable in the scenario to, to come up with detailed requirements for the project. Okay. Now, the person who is completely new is giving simple, straightforward answers. The person who is working as business is trying to use the technical language to provide their answer. Okay, so that is where we want these terminologies to become part of your daily routine so that you start using these terminology, and by the end of this course you are well versed in it, so that naturally when you appear for interviews you are talking in using these terminology only. The second part of the course talks about SDLC, that is Waterfall Methodology and Scrum framework, to be precise. So Scrum falls under the category of Agile, but we will be focusing mainly, again within Agile we'll be focusing mainly on Scrum part. Now this is where we will be covering our different activities that a business analyst carries out in detail. Okay, so we'll start with topics like stakeholder management, who is a stakeholder and why we prefer to use the term stakeholder over client. Okay, who is stakeholder, how do you manage or how do you assign roles and responsibilities to them? During stakeholder, what is meant by RACI metrics and how do you plot RACI metrics? Now, once we understood the term for stakeholder, then we move on to risk management topic. That is, what is risk, how do we identify risk, and how do we mitigate risk? Okay. Then we understand what is a requirement. How do you specify a good or a perfect requirement? What's the criteria for identifying a perfect requirement? What are the different types of requirement? For example, functional and non-functional requirement. So once we understand the requirement, then we move on to topics like requirement gathering and requirement elicitation. Okay. So we will try to cover different elicitation techniques like interview technique, brainstorming technique, okay, to understand which techniques are available for us to gather, to add details to requirements, and also how these techniques can be applied in different scenarios. Now, once we have understood that requirement elicitation part, then we move on to requirement sorting and prioritization. So basically what happens is whenever we have discussions with stakeholders in terms of gathering requirements or adding details, these requirements may not be in proper order. Okay, when we are going and discussing, because we don't know in advance what we are going to discuss. These are some of the conversations that that can happen in a proper order or that may not happen in any order, because order can only come in when you know everything in advance. And the thing is, we are not master of everything. We don't read our stakeholder or client's mind, like what they want to say. So at the end of this requirement gathering and elicitation, chances are that we have some unorganized requirements. We will get the requirements, but these could be unorganized. And as we go through these classes, you will understand that when we will have a class, one dedicated class on doing this requirement gathering and elicitation, post which we will see that most of the requirements that we would have written are slightly unorganized. So we sort it, we learn about why sorting is important, how it helps, and then what is requirement prioritization, and we will cover some of the techniques like Moscow technique. We will cover another technique called Kano model to understand how what's the prioritization techniques available to us and how different requirements are prioritized. Okay, so prioritization helps us deliver work in the given time frame. Okay, mostly why we need prioritization is because suppose my time duration is limited, so every day I have only 24 hours of time with me. So if I want to achieve more, if I want to be and if I want to ensure that within these 24 hours I'm able to deliver the best possible part that I can, then what I will do is I will start with the high priority work. So that is what this prioritization activity is trying to do. It is from the given set of requirement, it will try to identify what will be my highest priority requirements, so that my development team starts working on the highest priority first, so that we actually deliver the maximum value. Okay. Then once this prioritization is complete, we move on to requirement modeling. Okay. So what happens in modeling is now we will try to understand some of the tools like draw.io, which is basically used to create flowcharts. Now, we just simply try not to write or put every information in the form of texts. We try to create some diagrams as well, specifically flowcharts. Flowcharts will help everyone understand how the program or how the process flow would be. Okay, where the process would begin and how it will go through different steps before reaching the end or the destination for the designed process. So that is where the requirement modeling helps. We have ideas inside our head. What are the different types of ideas we have inside our head? And then how do we take help of a tool like draw.io to basically draw down or create flowchart whatever is inside my head now. Okay, then we use these flowcharts, that whatever flowcharts we have created, in the form of documents. Okay, so once we are done with requirement modeling, then we move on to another topic of importance of documentation. Why is documentation important, not just for business analysts, for others as well, but we will try to see how it really helps us. Okay, plus the different documents we are going to create. Okay, so we will take a look at BRD, FRD, use case. What are these documents? We will try to look at a general template. Now, industry wise or organization wise, like from one IT company to another IT company, the layout of BRD, FRD, or use case may slightly vary. Okay. It's not necessary that everyone will use the same template. So there could be some sections extra added or deleted in the form of BRD, FRD, or use case, but you will get the general idea, like what these documents are trying to capture in general. So we will look at the template first, that how the documents look like, and then what we will do is whatever requirements we have gathered so far, right from our starting classes. So whatever requirement we gathered, then whatever same requirement we will try to prioritize. For same requirement, we will try to do modeling. For same requirement, now we will try to put in the form of a documentation. Okay. People often think that getting the documentation is the main part. That is, getting the documentation is just one of the activities. But before getting to the documentation, whether you work in waterfall model, whether you work in agile model, any of it, what is really important is you should be able to gather requirements, elicit those requirements, perform sorting, prioritization, do modeling, and then once you have gathered all the data with you, then we start preparing the document. We don't jump onto the documentation on day one itself. Okay, our first intention is to gather as much details as possible so that we can get to the documentation part. See, the documentation, even though it is important, but company to company, the template could differ slightly. So irrespective of which company you are part of, we want to ensure that I have the basic information available. So if you ask me to write documents in one format or the other format, I'll be able to do along nicely without having any troubles. Okay. Now, once we are done with all these parts, then we start on to our next journey, or the next phase of this training program. That is, we start with the agile. Okay. So we will first try to understand what is agile. Then we will look at the term scrum. What is scrum? Then again, we will try to see what are the different components of scrum. Okay. This is just to ensure that all of us understand what are the different terms that are used within the scrum, because a lot of us, in fact every one of us, will be writing in our resume that we know scrum process, how it works, we have done backlog grooming or story grooming. So because we'll be writing down these words, so we have to understand what is meant by agile, what is scrum, what are the advantages, or what's the difference basically between scrum and waterfall. Okay. Sometimes this could also be asked as question like, what's the difference between the two? So when we go over topics of agile scrum, we will also understand what's the difference with respect to the two, waterfall and scrum. Then within scrum, what are the different components available? For example, we will understand in detail what is meant by sprint, what is product backlog, what are the different estimation techniques, what are the different scrum ceremonies or events that take place. Okay. Now, once we have understood in detail about the different components of Scrum and how these happens, then we will shift our focus to what we as business analysts will mainly be focusing on. Though we are involved in all the different phases, you can call that, a BA is like omnipresent, one who is present everywhere. So though a BA is involved in almost every phase of the software development and is interacting with almost all of the teams available, but we will be spending most of our time again in this requirement gathering and elicitation. Now, in the world of agile, we may be capturing our requirements in the form of user stories. So we will understand first what epics are and what is user story and what is the difference between the two. Okay. Then how do we write down user story? Similar to when we captured what, how can we call that we have written a good requirement? Similarly, how do we know, or what's the criteria for writing down a good story? So we will go through all those in detail, how to write user stories along with acceptance criteria. How do we ensure that we are writing down a good story in general? Okay. And then that is where we will also cover one tool called Jira. Okay. Jira is agile life cycle management tool. Okay. It is often mentioned as ALM, in short, ALM tool. Okay. So we will cover Jira, the basics of Jira, how a project is created, how epics or user stories are created within Jira, what are the different options available with us. Okay. How do we view our sprint? How do we view the dashboard? So we will first try to understand only the different options that are available to us in Jira so that we understand this tool better. Next, what we will do is whatever user stories we would have created along with acceptance criteria, we will take those user stories and start documenting in Jira. Okay. So once we have all our user stories in Jira, and that will be an activity that each one of you will be doing. You will be writing down your own user stories and you will be putting those user stories in Jira. Okay. So once you have written down your user stories in Jira, then what we will do is we will do a practical implementation of Scrum events or ceremonies. Okay. That is, what are the different events or ceremonies that happen within Scrum? That is sprint planning, okay, daily stand-ups or daily scrums, and then sprint review or demo. So we will go through those. Okay. Along with sprint planning or before sprint planning, you will also be doing backlog grooming. That is, whatever stories you would have written in Jira, you will be presenting your story to the other students of the class. Other students will have an opportunity to ask questions on what you have written, what are the details of it. Okay. So that will try and mimic the actual process that happens in the IT industry. That when you write when you write user stories, you have to present or show what the user stories you have written. Then your team will ask questions on top. Once they ask questions, you resolve their questions, and then we try to come up with an estimate once all the queries are resolved. So we have written user stories by now, and we know Jira, so we have documented all our user stories in Jira. Now we will, at the end, we would have done one exercise as well to present all the user stories that are being written. Then we move on to the third part of the course. That is the preparation for interview. But before we move on to there, any questions that you guys have so far?
Rahul, are we not using Visio tool?
No, Saujanya. So here we will be using Draw.io, which is exactly same as Visio. So whether you use Microsoft Visio, whether you use Draw.io, whether you use Lucid Chart, they all are offering you the same features, same implementation, and same diagrams as well.
Okay.
Okay. Preeti has a question. Backlog and user stories are same concept. So user stories are kept in backlog. So backlog you can consider is as a set of user stories. Okay, so a backlog may have user stories. Along with user stories, it could also have epics in it. Okay, any other questions, guys?
Hi Rahul, good morning. Will you be covering SQL as well in this course?
Yes, I'll explain to you uh, once we cover the topic for interview, because SQL we have kept at the last.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll get back to our topic for today. Now, the third part of it comes as preparation for interview. So by the time we reach there, we should have covered substantial amount of topics related to business analyst introduction, some of the key terms being used over there, SDLC, and for within waterfall methodology, we would have covered different topics over here. With respect to agile, we would have covered topics over here. So we should be well prepared with all the day-to-day items or all the regular piece of work that you guys are supposed to be work or doing as a business analyst. Okay. So what we will do is we will start our interview part by doing resume preparation first. Okay. Or actually we will do one more activity before it, that is, okay, so what's the reason for these two is just to make you understand that not everything that we work in IT industry always go as per plan. Okay? The failure does not mean that you could not deliver the work. Failure only means that a lot of time it will happen that you are supposed to do something in 2 weeks, but then you took slightly more than 2 weeks. Okay, so the failure is actually for that category of work. In IT industry, there is nothing like we did not deliver the work. Every time we are going to deliver the work. It's only the quality of the work. It's only in what timelines are we delivering the work. So there could be some of the delays around it. There could be some expectation mismatch as well. So we will look at, from my experience perspective, we will look at few cases where these delays happen, so that when you guys start working you can take into consideration those points, so that not further delays are happening. Also, we will look at, from my experience, some of the activities that you should do as BA and some of the activities that you should try doing as BA, so you should avoid conducting as BA. Okay, for example, criticizing your stakeholders or getting into an argument with your stakeholder. Okay, this is not advisable. And why not advisable? Now some of the activities that you should definitely do that we are going to cover is making notes or getting into the habit of making notes. So we have a list of certain activities that we will be covering in detail. Now these BA do's and don'ts and project failures will also help us in our interviews. Now next thing that we go is, once we have prepared our resume, I'll be sharing with you guys the commonly used terms that must be present in your resume, the format that you can opt for. Okay. Now, once you prepare your resume accordingly, you guys will have to share your resume with me so that I can also do a review. And if there are any changes needed, I can suggest accordingly. Now, once done, I have prepared a list of questions for interview. So I'll share these questions with you. Now, you are expected to provide an answer to these questions in the written format. You can upload it in the Google Classroom access, Google Classroom, that the access for which will be given once you all have enrolled into the class. So I'll be sharing the list of questions in the Google Classroom. You guys will be uploading your responses against those questions in the Google Classroom itself. Now, what happens is next day we will be discussing those questions again in our class. Okay. So when we discuss, we review the answers that are provided and what could be additionally added or changed in the answers that you have given, so that we provide more relevant details. Now, again, it is up to the students. If everyone agrees that we want to do one more round of check, that we have learned something on how to provide answers, and then we want to go back and we want to redo these things, we can do it again. Okay, or we can repeat this exercise again. Now, this entire activity of preparation for interview is usually kept for the last week, so that by the time we are done over here, you guys can start looking for jobs on Naukri or LinkedIn, start applying there. So by the time you get for interview, we will be already doing this parallelly. Okay, so we don't want you to wait till the end of the course and then start applying. Okay, now once we are done with the resume part and the interview questions as well, then we cover the overview of SQL. Now, the reason for having SQL in this course is not to scare you guys or not to tell you that SQL is mandatory, but just introduce yourself to SQL. Okay, this is not deep diving into SQL. This is not that I'll be teaching you right from the basics to becoming the master of SQL. SQL in itself is a completely different course. But my intention over here is to introduce students to the concept of SQL so that they understand what SQL is, how SQL can be utilized, what are the different ways in which it can be utilized, what are the different sources from where I can study about SQL, probably if it interests you. Okay. So the intention is, again, as I was explaining during demo, we do two kind of work. One is this core application development that is used in your day-to-day life. For example, if you want to update your phone number, you can use the application to update phone number. If you want to enroll, register, if you want to call customer care, customer support, all these activities could be carried out using your regular applications that your company is providing. On top of this, now a lot of people are adding data related capabilities. Okay, that is doing data analytics, data engineering, data science, and why these are necessary, so that we can evaluate how effectively our resources are being utilized. For example, I have customer support. I want to know how many people are calling into customer support or customer care center every day. How many people are utilizing chat related activities or chat related support. Now, if I see that number of people calling the customer care support is reducing, then maybe I don't need those many people. So maybe I can better utilize my resources somewhere else. Okay. So some of the data related capabilities that organizations are currently pursuing, it is over and above what the regular application development is. Now, when you are working in some of the projects which are data related, that is where the knowledge of SQL, again, not the master knowledge or not the expert level knowledge, but the basic knowledge of SQL will help you do your job effectively. Okay, because when you understand SQL, you can do some of the analysis on your own. And when we go through SQL, you will realize that using SQL to analyze data is not really that much difficult. But yeah, it will be helpful only when you are working on the data related projects. If you are working on regular application development where you are trying to develop a software or an application that can be used by the customers to do some of their day-to-day activities, then this SQL may not be of significant use to you. And still over here, I mean still in India, the majority of jobs that you guys will be applying for is on the application development side and not on the data side. But over time, the data related industry will mature as well, and there will be lot of opportunities on the data side as well, because a lot of focus is now shifting to Python, SQL, Power BI, Tableau, and lot of new jobs are coming up over there as well. Okay, so again, it will be overview of SQL and not the complete deep dive into understanding every aspects of SQL. Now, with the introduction to SQL, we will be completing our course. Okay, now this entire topic that we have discussed over here, it can take about, let's say, 30 hours of training to 45 hours of training. Now we are not putting any specific number because it depends on how the students enrolled also are getting along. Okay, we simply don't want to cover a topic today and then tomorrow move on to the new topics. If I simply cover new topics every day, probably this entire course could be finished within 30 hours or maybe less than 30 hours also. But we want to ensure that students also get to know what they are doing, plus they should have the ability to ask questions. So coming on with that background, coming on to rules of conduct, what we will be doing is every day we will be focusing on having 45 to 50 minutes of regular topic. Okay, whatever topic we want to study. And then the remaining 10 to 15 minutes we want to keep it for questions and answers. It will be your chance to ask questions related to whatever topic we will be covering. During the next day, what we will do is we will for 5 minutes we will revise what we studied yesterday. Okay, and then get back to point number one, that is cover the regular topic for the day and then leave some time aside for Q&A. Okay, so this will become the part of this training program, that every day we will revise what we studied yesterday. Okay, then we will cover the topic for the day and then set aside certain time for questions. Now this does not mean that I will speak for 45-50 minutes in one go and then at the end I'll give you an opportunity to ask question. That's not the way it will happen. In between itself I will be giving you opportunity to ask questions. So this 10 minute does not mean at the end of the class. This 10 minutes could be spread across the class as well. Okay, so do utilize these times to ask whenever you have questions in mind, you are able to ask these questions. Okay, then the third thing is, now sometimes I may be in the middle of explaining a topic. So when I am explaining a topic, you will naturally get some questions as well. Now what I would expect you guys is like, instead of interrupting, if you can note down your question. Okay, so that way you don't forget your question, that whatever came to your mind, you don't forget that question. Now, whenever I take a pause and ask you for questions, you can simply look back to your notes and ask the question from it. Okay? Because sometimes if I'm explaining a topic and if you interrupt, and I'm not against interrupting, but it disturbs the flow. So sometimes if I stop you from asking any question, you may forget also. So that's why I always say to students that before you forget, make a note of your questions, and then at the right time, when I take a break, when I'm asking you for questions, throw in your questions. So that way you are not interrupting me. That way I'm not discouraging you from asking any questions, or I'm not stopping you from asking questions. And also you are not forgetting your questions because you have made a note of it. Okay. Now, next is we want you to be as regular as possible for this entire training duration. Okay, we want you to be as regular as possible, but along with being regular, there will be few assignments that will be assigned. Okay, now during the introduction of business analyst part, there may not be enough assignments because in the first few days we are trying to build the basics part. But when we get on to business analyst related topics, there will be assignments at the regular intervals. So along with being regular to the class, it is also the expectation from us that you guys will complete the assignments in a timely fashion. Okay, these assignments are designed not to like just not to give you something for practice, but basically that practice will enable you to revise the concepts. See, we all are studying certain things and then we all want to go back and revise. So assignments help you revise whatever we studied in the class, plus gives you an option to do an actual hands-on so that you can build the confidence that okay, I'm able to do this assignment. That means I can certainly I can certainly start working. Now this confidence will help you during your interview sessions as well. Okay, so if you are regular, if you are completing your assignments in a timely fashion, now these things will really help you clear out your interviews. Okay, so small steps like these will help you ensure that you actually clear the final hurdle, that is clearing the interview, and start working as business analyst. Remember, clearing interview is just one part. There is another major part of working as business analyst. So when you have sufficient confidence, for you it will be easier to take on that challenge of working as business analyst. So not just be regular, but try to complete all the assignments as well. It is for your own benefit only. Okay, now at the end of the course, and especially during the third part, which is the interview preparation part, before that I'll be giving you one separate case study. Now while I give you the case study, we will be working on these aspects. Okay, so this will take around, let's say, 5 to 7 hours of duration. So that will be 5 to 7 days. Now the expectation is, while these are not major topics, these are not, sorry, not major, these are not new topics related to business analysts. In this entire third part, we are basically trying to revise whatever we have studied so far. So basically for interviews, we are kind of revising what we have studied so far. So the expectation is during this time, you will be parallelly working on case studies and you will utilize the time for this third part of the course to ask questions on your case studies as well. How is it coming along? How are you working upon it? Do you have any questions around it? So that you can repeat this entire activity using the case study. Create a new flowchart, document those case studies, create user stories, epics in Jira for the case study. Okay. So that the entire set of activities that we did together or in pieces, you can execute this entire set of activity on your own. Okay, now utilize this opportunity again to build confidence. Now usually I don't suggest or I don't recommend putting the case study in your resume. Okay, case studies, because of the reason that you have not worked the end-to-end part. That is, you would have created some requirement out of case study, but you never created a software on it. Okay, so for putting up things in your resume, you should always refer back to your current work, whether it is related to IT, whether it is related to non-IT. In your current work, what kind of software are you using? why are you using that software? Okay, nowadays everyone has access to in their organization the software that is being used. So use that software to mention the input. Okay. No, that will be it from my side, guys. Do you have any questions? Okay, I can take the silence as no questions. So we will meet on Monday at the same time, that is 7 a.m. So Ankit, you will get the example of assignment once we get to the actual topics. Okay.
Hi Rahul. Uh, because I'm working in a hybrid model now, so my office will be from Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So I'll be attending the class on Tuesday and Fridays only. The other days only I'll be listening because I'll be traveling to my office. So that should be fine, right? And I will come back home by around 7:30 in the evening. I can watch the recorded videos. And if I have any doubts and questions, that I can put you on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm sorry, Tuesday and Friday. So I feel that should be fine, right?
Yes, absolutely. Or you can do one more thing, Manu, that if you have any list of questions, you can in when the meeting starts, you can simply copy paste your questions and then put it in the chat box as well, so that we take up your questions, because all these sessions will get recorded. We will take up your questions, provide answers to your questions, so that again when you come back in the evening and when you go through these recorded sessions, you could find answers to the questions that you asked. If you wait for 1 or 2 days, I mean, you can do that as well, but sometimes what happens is if you wait for 1 or 2 days and then ask your questions, then chances are this topic you would slightly forget. The more we wait, the lesser clarity we have. So you can do it either ways you are comfortable. If you want, you can ask on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you want, you can prepare a list of questions, and at the start of the class you can paste it in the chat box, so that we will take up those questions from previous class first and then move on with the regular topic.
Fair enough, Rahul. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, guys, then we will meet on Monday, same time. We will start with our first topic on Monday, that is the commonly used terms in the IT industry and what each term actually means for you, so that during our course, when we use those terms, you guys don't feel that this is completely new or I'm not aware of it. So Monday, same time, 7 a.m. Thank you, everyone.